Hello there, Physically Debunked here, and welcome to another video all about nothing. Today I'm going to be dealing with what is often called the biggest question of them all. Fortunately, I should be able to fit it all within this small video. If you've somehow missed the title of this video, the question I'm referring to is this: why is there something rather than nothing? This is a question that has reverberated through history and continues to evoke strong feelings in those discussing it today. Over 2,500 years ago, the ancient Greek philosopher Parmenides mused on the nature of nothingness. Less than 100 years ago, the German philosopher Martin Heidegger called it the most fundamental question of metaphysics. Even more recently, physicists seem to want to get in on the act, claiming that quantum physics may shed new light on the old question. Now, if you want a firm answer to the question from this video, then I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. People have been attacking this question for millennia, and there's no way that it's going to be solved in a short YouTube video. The reason then that I wanted to discuss this question is because theists often use it to expose what they think is a flaw in the atheist worldview. We atheists have to admit that we have no idea what the answer to this question is. We don't know the reason why there is something rather than nothing. Theists, on the other hand, are convinced that they have a conclusive answer. There is something rather than nothing because God had to exist, and then God created everything. Putting aside the plethora of problems with this line of reasoning, such as how theists can explain why a good God capable of creating the entire universe had to exist, because theists think that they have an answer to the question, they see the atheist's lack of one as a serious shortcoming. What I want to discuss, therefore, is whether answering this question is as vital as theists assert. Does any serious worldview have to have a satisfactory answer? Or could it be the case that this question isn't as fundamental as some philosophers have claimed? Could it be the case that this question isn't even meaningful? To kick things off, let's not ask yet whether the question is meaningful, and let's think about how important the question actually is. This will lead to my first criticism of the question, which is that it's only a sensible one to ask if we make a presupposition. Let me explain. Let's suppose we have a guy. Call him Martin. He has milk delivered to him each week by a milkman. This milkman has delivered milk to him every week for years without fail. One day, however, Martin goes to the door, opens it, and finds that instead of milk, he's been left a bottle of orange juice. Why is there orange juice rather than milk? He cries. This seems like a sensible question to ask. Surely there's some good reason as to why the milkman hasn't delivered what was expected. Now suppose that this didn't actually happen. Maybe Martin just dreamt it. In reality, the milkman has always delivered milk, never orange juice. On this day, Martin gets up, goes to the door, and finds that there is a bottle of milk outside, as he expected. But then he asks, why is there milk rather than orange juice? In contrast to the previous scenario, where the question why is there orange juice rather than milk seemed like a sensible question, this question sounds downright silly. Asking why he's ended up with milk when he was expecting there to be milk doesn't make any sense. So what does this tell us about the question, why is there something rather than nothing? It tells us that this question is only a sensible one to ask if we were expecting there to be nothing. If we were expecting there to be nothing and found that actually there was something, then the question seems an important one. There needs to be a good reason as to why things aren't as we expected them to be. If instead we were expecting something to exist, then suddenly the question, why is there something rather than nothing, seems like a silly one to ask. The question is only a pertinent one if we make a presupposition. Only if we assume that the existence of nothing is to be expected rather than the existence of something, does the question attain the importance that many theists attach to it. But why should the existence of nothing be what we expect? Nowhere in the universe is there nothing. Everywhere you look, everything that surrounds you is always something. What reason do we have to expect that there should have been nothing rather than something? If you go with the evidence that's around us, that the existence of something is to be expected, then the question loses its significance. Now, I don't mean to say that the question isn't meaningful. Even if we should expect something to exist rather than nothing, there could well be a fascinating and important reason why this has to be the case. I'm personally interested in certain areas of fundamental physics because I want to learn more about how all the something around us could have been produced. I want to learn more about the possible answers to the question of why there is something rather than nothing. So I think the question is certainly an interesting one, But is it a question that every worldview must immediately answer? As I've already discussed, this question is only indispensable if you presuppose that there should be nothing rather than something. A thought-provoking argument along these lines is provided by the distinguished philosopher Peter van Inwagen, who argues that the existence of something is far more probable than the existence of nothing. Van Inwagen points out that whereas there's only one way in which nothing exists, there are infinitely many ways in which something exists. There's only one state of pure nothingness, but infinitely many states in which something exists. For any sensible probability distribution over these states, this would entail that the existence of nothing is maximally improbable as you can get. Now, while I'm not convinced that this argument is entirely watertight, it does support the general thrust of my argument that we have no good reason to expect that nothing exists rather than something, and hence it isn't vital for any particular worldview to provide a concrete explanation for why something exists. Now that we've discussed whether it's important to answer the question, let's take a look at whether it's even a meaningful one. I've already said that I think there's a good chance that there is an interesting answer to the question, but some thinkers have gone much further than this, suggesting that the question doesn't have any meaning at all, and hence no meaningful answer. There's an intriguing interview on Closer to Truth where philosopher Stephen Law discusses whether the question makes sense. He suggests that some philosophical therapy may be needed to make us realise that asking why there is something rather than nothing is just as meaningless a question as what's north of the North Pole, or what time is it on the sun. In these cases, it's easy to see why the questions aren't sensible ones. North is defined such that there is nothing north of the North Pole, and time zones are only defined on Earth. You'll be quick to realise that these questions are confused because we're very well acquainted with the concepts of north and of time zones on the Earth. When we consider why is there something rather than nothing, however, it's much harder to determine whether this question is confused in a similar way, because we don't have as good a grasp of the concept involved. We don't have a good grasp of nothingness, and we don't know if absolute nothingness is a concept that even makes sense in reality. What we should realise is that we're asking a question which concerns things external to our spatio-temporal universe, but from a perspective within the spatio-temporal universe. Because we exist in a realm where there isn't nothingness, it's not clear that asking why there's not nothing is meaningful. Now, this is a difficult thing to wrap your head around, and it's something I'm certainly still struggling with, but here's an analogy that may help. In mathematics, we build mathematical systems from some axioms that we state in advance. Let's take the real number system we're all familiar with. Then in this case, our axioms are the rules of arithmetic. We define what numbers are and the operations we can perform on them. From these rules, these axioms, the incredibly rich structure of the real numbers arises, and we can deduce many relationships and truths about the numbers. If we consider the question though, why are there numbers rather than nothing, we can quickly see that it doesn't make much sense. There's no sum you can perform, no manipulation of the real numbers that's going to produce an answer to this question. That's because there's no way to prove the axioms of the system from within the system itself. From within the system of arithmetic, the question, why are there these axioms rather than nothing, doesn't make sense. There's no mathematical answer to it, no answer you can give from within the system. Applying this back to our situation, it may be the case that because we exist in a spatio-temporal world, asking why there's a spatio-temporal world at all is like numbers asking why there are axioms rather than nothing. It isn't a question that has a meaningful answer from within the system itself. Now, you could argue that even if we can't prove axioms from within a mathematical system, there is still a reason why they exist. Humans do mathematics. Humans are responsible for coming up with axioms, and so the reason that there are axioms rather than nothing is because humans do mathematics. But this doesn't seem correct if you accept the view, as many philosophers and mathematicians do, that mathematical systems and the statements within them would be true even if humans didn't exist. The truth of a mathematical statement is considered to be independent of the existence of humans, so there still doesn't seem to be an answer to the question, why are there numbers rather than nothing, even if you look outside the realm of numbers. Perhaps even if there is a reality beyond our spatio-temporal universe, there still wouldn't be a meaningful answer to the question, why does our universe exist rather than nothing? Perhaps the question is just meaningless. Let's try and wrap things up. What's the takeaway message from all this? For me, I think that there's a good case to be made that the question itself is meaningless. But even if this is the case, I don't think we should disregard the question altogether. Even if there is no answer to it, it could still be meaningful to understand why this is the case. We understand why asking what's north of the North Pole is a meaningless question, and it could similarly be enlightening to understand why asking why there's something rather than nothing is also a meaningless question. What we should realise is that there isn't an obvious reason to believe that this question is meaningful. It's also the case that unless you presuppose that the existence of nothing was to be expected, then this question isn't even a vital one for any particular worldview to answer. Theists who assert that atheism is somehow incoherent or inconsistent because it doesn't provide an explanation for why there's something, are probably giving the question far too much attention. To quote Sydney Morgenbesser's reply to the question, "If there were nothing, you'd still be complaining." Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you found this interesting. Please like and subscribe for more physics, philosophy, atheism, and stuff.